Hello. Today I wanted to share some spiritual truth and awareness with the Jack of Spades that I've been really landing into today in my reflections. And, the Jack of Spades in 11 energy today, and then with the 7 energy year, which I'll be talking about more as we go, is encouraging us to empower ourselves to and other people through awakening to the value and wisdom of our creative storytelling abilities. The Jack of Spades is the ultimate storyteller. And I want to share some of my experiences with the Jack of Spades because this is a really key card in my personal numerology chart, my life chart. And also, I have a lot of experiences with men in my life being Jack of Spades, particularly born on this day. The Jack of Spades has 2 birth dates in the calendar year, January 3rd and February 1st. So there's only 2 days of the year that can birth a Jack of Spades. And I seem to attract the ones born on January 3rd. And I think that's particularly because of the underlying planetary ruling contract of the Ten of Diamonds. I have a big connection to that also in my chart, and a lot of karma I've been working out in my life around that, both of these cards actually. So I find it really interesting, and I just wanted to share a little bit more about the Jack of Spades that maybe you don't already know. So the first Jack of Spades, I'm going to tell you about the people in my life because this is really how I've been learning. And, this is interesting because I've been talking a little bit about and sharing a little bit about sacred contract readings and what I've been doing with those and helping people. And particularly writers and creatives to really come into an understanding of why they've had certain relationships in their life, whether it's been with a romantic relationship or a parent-child relationship or anything like that, business relationship, whatever. When you look at the birth dates of the people and you compare their contracts, you can see why they're drawn to each other. And so I've been drawing in these Jack of Spades. And when you understand why you're drawing in a certain energy and what it's there to teach you, it's coming in, these people are coming in with these contracts to teach you certain things that you've come here to learn. And that's why you have these overlaps in your contracts. So for me, this Jack of Spades, especially the January 3rd one, has been very key in my chart and my experiences. So the first Jack of Spades that I encountered was my ex-husband, which, at the time he wasn't an ex, but he is now. And he exhibited the qualities of Jack of Spades, mostly the low side of it. There's always a high side and a low side expression of each of the cards. And he really struggled spiritually, and that's a really difficult thing for a Jack of Spades because it is a very spiritually focused card. It's one of the highest. It's really the spiritual initiate card, the highest level of spiritual initiation that you can get. And so when they're not following a spiritual path, they can get into a lot of trouble and have a lot of suffering in their lives. And he was well, okay, both of these actually compare them together because the other guy was someone I was attracted to. He was a musician and a very wealthy person. So, and then my ex-husband was very creative in all of that, but he did not use that to. He was very withdrawn, shy, except with people that he knew really well. But he was an incredible storyteller. He was very funny. He had tons and tons of creativity. These are qualities that Jack of Spades have. But he was afraid to share it. He was afraid to he didn't have the confidence. He didn't trust himself. He wasn't able to be honest with himself and others. So his storytelling most of the time took on the form of lies and cheating and theft, dishonesty, addictions, things like that. So that's the lower expression of the Jack of Spades that can come through. But the higher expression is this, creative performer, the creative expressionist, where they're musicians, artists, painters, actors, all of this stuff, and they can be very successful when they share their gifts with the world. But they really do have a higher spiritual calling, and when they bring that element into their art, into their expression, into what they're sharing, that's when they can really fully step into their true purpose of why they're here, which is to really make a huge difference in the world, to be of service to the world in a greater way, to lead people to a higher spiritual calling. And so these two men, the one was, really caught up in the lower side. The other was more in the higher expression. But I watched them both over the years, and, as they got older, one of the things that can happen with a Jack of Spades is that they, can be very attached to the material world. And even with the musician who was very wealthy, because the Ten of Diamonds can be inheritance, he inherited money. So he was very wealthy. And yet he, was still on the lower side in some ways in his life. He wasn't able, at least from my perception, he wasn't able to experience the love that he wanted to experience in his life. He was always surrounded by all these beautiful models and everything, but he couldn't seem to form these relationships that would be fulfilling for him. And that is one of the challenges for a Jack of Spades as well. Hi, Francine, good to see you. And so he was struggling with this, and now I've seen he's had a spiritual awakening around this, and he is now found somebody, and he's doing things too in the world where he is very focused on helping Ukrainian refugees. He is Ukrainian himself originally, and he's helping that. He's raising awareness and consciousness. He's been doing that for a while. Earlier on, he was raising consciousness about, musicians' rights and things like that around the copyrights and, all of the, like, Apple Music and all of those streaming services, and how they take away a lot of the money from the musicians and all of that. And so, hi, Samantha. So this is really interesting about these Jack of Spades, because they do have this calling to serve the world in a greater way, in a greater purpose. And I see this one guy, he did start to step into that, and he's really starting to come into the full higher side of his chart. I don't know about my ex-husband. I lost contact with him, but I can say several years ago, the last time I did hear from him, he was still very much in the low side. He was still trying to get around the law and, find ways to basically just circumvent all of the legal rules and everything like that. He was, still doing dishonest things, and still in a lot of poverty and a lot of lack consciousness, and still not embracing his role to provide that, to be that spiritual initiate beacon for the rest of the world, to help people come into their higher purpose and calling and do something good in the world with all of his gifts and talents. So he has not, as far as I know, he maybe now he has. I haven't heard from him since, but that is a big difference. It's really interesting, these two people who were born on the same day and how they've navigated their charts so differently from each other, and the extreme examples of them being in the higher or the low side of the Jack of Spades. So the other interesting tidbit about the Jack of Spades is they can be incredible lovers. They're one of the best. They're one of the best cards for sexual enjoyment in the whole book of life. So if you do meet one, you could expect that from them. And that's just a little fun tidbit. But the Jacks are fun, and they are here to also, encourage us to create the life that we love, to enjoy life, to make it fun, to make it creative, to allow our creative expression through. And this Jack of Spades in particular is about doing that for a higher purpose, doing that to create change in the world, to create a spiritual awakening. The jacks are all 11s in the, when you go through the numbers, the jacks are right after the 10, so they are representative of the number 11. And today is also an 11 energy day, so you get that 11-11 today, which is this higher spiritual awakening. And it is calling us into realizing that we are conscious creators, that we have the ability as spiritual beings to really create anything, to create the life that we want, to create any experience that we want. And if we don't like the experience we're having right now, that we can change it, that we have that ability and that power. And so this is one of the gifts of the Jack of Spades that he comes in to share with us. The other thing about the Jack of Spades is, just like I was talking about right in the beginning, this gift of storytelling. So, and because I work with so many writers, speakers, creatives that, are storytellers, all of them, whether they use their voice or they use a pen or they use a paintbrush or they use their physical movement of their body or a camera, whatever they're using to tell their stories, they are storytellers and they are writers and in their own right. And so, they have a story to share, they have wisdom to share. And it's really interesting because, we talk a lot about releasing attachment to our stories, letting our old stories go. And that is true. That is absolutely true. And that's part of this spiritual initiation energy that we're being called into. And yet, our stories, once we detach from them, there's no charge with them anymore. They don't hold any emotional charge to us, with us, through us. And so we're no longer being run by them. Once we learn how to do that, and this is a big part of what I teach and guide artists and creatives and writers to do, is detach from their stories, how to detach from those so that they can really come into sharing those stories without reliving them. Because this is the power of the story that they have, is they've gained wisdom from it. They can learn the wisdom through that detachment. Once they can separate themselves from the story, see they're not the story, then they can learn what wisdom is there. And I use numerology to do this. I use other techniques through working with the cycle of divine timing, which is also part of numerology. But I coach writers and creatives on how to do this, how to really let go of those old stories, see that they have the power to create their new story, help them to start creating that new story, and use their old stories as teaching tools, as ways to share their wisdom of, here's what happened to me and how I learned from it. Because there's so much value in it. So when we're talking about detaching from our stories, we don't want to throw them away. We just want to take the charge out of them, because then we can gain the wisdom and have the wisdom to share. Hi, Kelly. How are you? So I think that's really important, a lesson from the Jack of Spades that it has to share with us. Last year I met a third Jack of Spades that was born on this day. And the other interesting thing about them, and some of the contract cards, you'll find this with more than others, and for some reason I've noticed a theme with these Jack of Spades men. They all have this really long, kind of curly, wavy, dark hair, and they have sort of a rectangular facial structure, and like a high, almost not really protruding forehead. It's not exaggerated, but a little bit, where the forehead is a little heavier than the eyes. I'm not sure if I'm describing that right. I'm trying to think of like a famous person I can give you an example of, but I can't think of one right now. If I think of one, I'll put a picture in the comments later. But they have some impatience about them too, and this is you can see it in their face. If you know Chinese face reading like I do, you can see it in their face with the shape of their forehead, and also their eyebrows are generally closer to their eyes. So when you see that, that can be a sign of impatience. And they look like that. These three Jack of Spades that I know, they all look like that, all three of these men. So it's really interesting. But oh, now I lost my train of thought. Oh, so I met this third one last year, just online. I haven't met him in person, but from what I can tell so far, he actually is somewhere in between. So it's really interesting for me because this is a key. It's a key card in my own chart. It's my spiritual spread Pluto position, which is all about what action or challenge you need to overcome in your life. And so for me, there's been a lot about overcoming, my stories, my attachment to my stories. It's been overcoming the fears around the physical world so that I could, come into more honesty, be more honest about money and my emotions, be more honest with myself about my spiritual truths and how none of this world is even real. So I've had a lot of big lessons around all of that, like many Jack of Spades. Actually, all Jack of Spades do. And Jack of Spades also, interestingly enough, they can have a big spiritual awakening at a particular point in their chart. And it can come through some pretty extreme circumstances sometimes, like my ex landed in jail more than once. Sometimes it only takes once for them to have the spiritual awakening. Some are a little more stubborn. That can happen. I know with the musician, the other musician guy, he, and both of them actually, I'll have to ask the third one, I don't know. But the first two, my ex-husband and this other guy, they both lost parents very young, which can be part of that chart as well. It's part of the learning and the life lessons of detachments. They've got a particular card, the Seven of Hearts, in their Venus that can cause some of that loss in their experience of the people closest to them. And that's why they also can struggle with their personal relationships, romantic relationships, and so forth. And they both lost parents. The musician lost both of his parents, and that's one of the reasons he became so wealthy, because he inherited all this money. But my ex lost his father at a very young age, and then he ran away from home because he was being severely abused by his uncle, and so was his mother, and just these really horrible stories, right? But all of these stories that they have, they can use and tap into to teach people later to, detach from the stories, gain the wisdom, and share that wisdom that they learned. Because usually these stories eventually cause a spiritual awakening. So some of them will never get it. Some people are not, they're just not going to really wake up while they're here this time. But many of them do get this at some point in their life, mostly mid to later life. They get the spiritual awakening, and then they start shifting, like I was sharing about the musician. He really started shifting into how he could start serving the world, how he could start making a difference. And so, yeah, that's the really interesting things about the Jack of Spades, and just for my own personal experience, because I've had so many of them in my life. And the point of it was, to really teach me about my own Jack of Spades experience. So, my Jack of Spades in my chart. And this is why we attract people in to our experiences that are key cards in our chart, so that we can learn them. I attract in a lot of the key cards in my chart, just so I can learn the lessons of those cards. And so they're here to be mirrors for us, so that we can learn these lessons. So if you have a Jack of Spades somewhere prominent in your chart, or if today's your birthday, or if February 1st is your birthday, then you are the Jack of Spades, and these would be some of the things that you're probably going, yeah, I've dealt with this stuff. And this applies to males and females with this card contract. So it's interesting, but each day, each moment is an opportunity to let go of the attachments that we have to our past stories. And we can create a new story by embracing the spiritual truth of who we are. And this is really the key understanding of the Jack of Spades in its highest form is, by embracing the power of love to leverage as our creative force, to create from love, not to create from lack or unfulfilled desires or anything that we think we need to get from outside of us, that really we have all of it inside already. We have all the love, we have all the money, we have all the resources, we have all of that power inside of us when we tap into the power of love, when we tap into the power of our soul, our essence, our spiritual truth, our connection as a unique and divine expression of source energy. And so that's really what the Jack of Spades is here to learn and here to teach and here to initiate the world into those higher states of spiritual awareness and awakening. It's a big job, and it's the Jack that has by far the most responsibility, and so they do go through a lot of challenging things sometimes in their life. And if you have a Jack of Spades in a prominent part in your chart, then you also will probably have experienced a lot of challenging things in your life, because you're meant to learn these lessons, and it's your displacement this year. So yeah, you'll be faced with that. This is about ultimately being very honest with yourself, and then through that honesty with yourself, you can be honest with others. So stop telling yourself stories. One of the things that I know has been coming up around this for me, I also have another Jack in my chart right now, in my seasonal chart for my year that came in, the Jack of Clubs, which also wants us to look at our mental stories, what stories we're telling ourselves. So these two are playing with each other right now with me big time. And one of the things I'm noticing is with the 7 energy year and then the 3 in the 2023, so that 7 and 3 working together can create a lot of negative self-talk. It can create a lot of negative stories running through your mind about who you are, what you are capable of, what you're not capable of, just all kinds of comparisons and judgments and criticisms and all kinds of stuff like that. So in the low side. So we have to be really conscious of our thoughts. And especially if you have the Jack of Spades in your displacement right now, Samantha, I would definitely be very conscious of that. I'd be posting affirmations all over the frickin' place in my phone to pop up on my reminders, like all kinds of stuff just to keep pulling you back to your spiritual truth. Make sure you're taking time every day to, throughout your day, just pause for a moment, close your eyes, because it's so powerful to close your eyes, because that's when you come within. Closing your eyes actually helps you just come within for a moment. Focus on your breath, come back to the truth of who you are. Whenever you feel those thoughts coming up, if they get really out of control, which sometimes for me they do, especially because of what's going on in my chart right now with a really heavy mental energy, but all of us have really heavy mental energy this year overall anyway. So if you don't even have this added influence, you may still be noticing that you get caught sometimes in the mental spinning. And if you feel that happening, again, close your eyes and bring yourself back to self, back to center, back to truth, back to remembering you are source, that you are a unique expression of source. Bring yourself back into that connection. You can use tools like quantum expansion, Q, which if you don't know what that is, comment, I'll let you know. I'll help you with that. I'll give you some links to videos I've done that will take you through the process. You can use tools like on my YouTube channel, I have a sound healing playlist that you can tap into, and there are specific ones on there that give you the 417 hertz frequency, which helps you clear the negative thoughts. So some of the time, and I'll use the tribal drumming too, which is also on there to clear that and disrupt the negative thought patterns. So it creates that disruption. It helps bring things back into alignment. Now, ultimately, we don't need anything outside of ourselves to do this, but sometimes while we're going through this process of spiritual initiation into these higher levels, we can grab some of these tools to help us. We don't want to become dependent on them, but we also don't want to, force ourselves to try and do it all ourselves. If you're really having a hard time, use the tools. They're here to help you, and they do really help. They do really work. So, these are some of the things that I've found have been really powerful. But, in my own story, just really owning my abilities, my capabilities, my gifts, my talents as a creative. I'm a 3 of Spades. So I'm extraordinarily creative, and I'm here to create for a higher spiritual purpose. I have a very deep connection with the Jack of Spades for this reason, because we are so similar to each other in that way. And yet the Jack holds more responsibility than maybe I do, but because he's such a key part of my chart, I really do anyway. So I've definitely been faced with a lot of lessons about being honest with myself and others in so many ways, and coming into that role of serving the world for a higher spiritual purpose and bringing people back to love. And that's what I like to do when I work with the writers and creatives is, really helping them do that, really helping them clear all the crap out of the way that makes them feel unworthy, that keeps them stuck, that keeps them frozen, from expressing fully or at all sometimes because of fears, because of these feelings of unworthiness, because there's old stories. There's all these old stories that need to be detached from, so that they can be transmuted and transformed into a teaching tool, into a way to share wisdom, instead of something that's keeping you trapped, stuck, holding you back. And so that's what I do with my clients, and just in sharing my wisdom here on Facebook and with the world, with YouTube, all of that, right? So this is what the Jack of Spades is calling us into today. It's this higher spiritual initiation, this wisdom, and this understanding that there is so much power in your stories once you are willing to let them go. Then you can use them. Then you can use them to teach. But you have to detach from them first, because when you're still attached to your stories, every time you tell them, you're creating another feedback loop of it, and you're creating more of the same in your life. So you want to make sure that before you're telling those stories, before you're sharing those stories, and also if you're attached to them, you're still not in possession of the full wisdom to be gained from those stories. So it's really key to be able to do that. So, I have a program coming up for writers and creatives of my own. I'm also been invited to speak at the Choose Your Best Life Summit coming up in a couple of weeks here. And I'm really excited about that, because I'm going to be teaching you how to free your voice through forgiveness, which is really one of the rituals that is near and dear to my heart, that has been truly a game changer for me in being able to clear these stories and come into the full understanding of what wisdom is to be gained from them. So that is coming up, and I have the link in my bio. You can click on to register. It's a free summit, completely free, so you can register for that. And I'm hoping to see you there. Also, if you want to, and you feel really, honestly, seriously, feel into your heart, be honest with yourself. Are you ready to break through all of the blocks that are keeping you from fully expressing your creative wisdom with the world? Because if you are, I'd love to chat with you. You can comment below, or you can message me privately, come to the summit, whatever you want to do, but connect with me so that we can talk about how I can help you do that, because this is what I do. I've had so much experience of this in my own experiences of having to break through all of this stuff, and as I continue on that journey, I just gain more and more wisdom. But I've already been able to help so many people just by what I've already learned. And that, I think, is also the message of the Jack. You know enough right now. You know enough to help a lot of people. If you're waiting to get it like fully or fully arrive, there is no finish line. We don't ever finish this spiritual journey. We're always continually growing, expanding, changing, expanding consciousness. So stop waiting. This is the time to take action. So I hope to see you guys at the summit, and I hope to chat with you if you're really ready to move forward, get unstuck, break through, about how we can work together and help you do that this year. And thank you so much for joining. I have missed seeing you too, Rosalie. I needed to take some time to do some inner work and some rearranging right there at the end of the year, and I'm ready to be back and really share all of this wisdom that the Book of Life has for us, and the universal laws, and my favorite law of divine timing, and working with that to really create transformation in our own lives and the lives of others through our creative expression. I love you guys so much. Thanks for joining today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.